The first thing you need to know is that I wasn't supposed to talk about this. Not to my friends, not to my family, not to you. But silence has its own way of killing a man. And if you've ever driven that long stretch of highway at night, you need to hear this. You deserve to know what waits out there when the world forgets you. My truck sat in the middle of the blacktop, engine idling with a low animal growl. The amber lights on top flickered like they were struggling to stay alive, throwing bursts of sickly color across the broken asphalt. I should have been hooking up a car, or tightening chains, or radioing in the job. That's what I do: tow trucks, night shifts, drunks in ditches. That's my world. But that night I wasn't alone. The high beams were fractured. One of the bulbs shattered from a stone chip, so the light stretched unevenly into the dark. And there, caught in the broken wash of white and shadow, stood something. Not a deer, not a man. It was wrong, taller than it should have been, limbs bent as though someone had put them together out of spare parts, and regret. It didn't move when the wind picked up, didn't blink when the dust curled around its feet. It just waited. My hand hovered over the gear shift, but I couldn't pull away, couldn't even breathe. The sound of the engine felt deafening, like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. If I killed it, if silence swallowed the road, I was sure the thing would step closer. I wish I could tell you I floored it, that I had the sense to get out of there. But the truth is, I stayed. I stared, and it stared back. And in that space, between us, I swear, I heard something like whispers curling through static, saying my name. This isn't the kind of thing you just stumble into once. It isn't a random fluke. It's a pattern, a ritual, a shift in the world that chooses you. And once you're chosen, there's no clocking out. I didn't know that then. I only knew my lights were failing, my chest was tight, and something inhuman was standing in the middle of my road. But before I get ahead of myself, before I tell you how deep this goes, and why I'll never leave the night shift, you need to know how it started. Because not all jobs are honest work. Some of them are invitations. Asterisk. Most nights it's just me, my truck, and the radio static. Almost peaceful until it isn't. You wouldn't think towing cars at 2 in the morning is anything more than a blue-collar grind. But the night shift has a way of showing you sides of the world the daytime hides. People forget that highways breathe differently in the dark. The air feels thicker. The shadows stretch longer. And every headlight you pass feels like it might be the last pair of human eyes you'll see for hours. The job itself is simple on paper. Answer the call, haul the wreck, clean up the mess. But in reality, the routine's broken by long stretches of silence where the only sound is my engine humming and the occasional hiss of tires on the cracked pavement. That silence, it gets into you. Sometimes I'll turn on the radio just to have voices in the cab, but even then, the static comes and goes, like the stations know when I'm too far out for comfort. Loneliness? You get used to it. Hell, sometimes it's a blessing. Nobody around to argue, nobody to breathe down your neck. But then there are the nights when the loneliness shifts, and you start feeling like something else is out there with you. Watching. Waiting. I cover everything from drunks who've wrapped their cars around guardrails to teenagers, too busy texting to notice the ditch waiting for them. You'd be surprised how often I pull someone out who swears they never saw the curve. My favorite excuse so far came from a guy reeking of whiskey who told me the road moved under him. I laughed at the time. Now, I'm not so sure he was wrong. And don't get me started on the strange things people leave in their cars. You wouldn't believe the number of creepy dolls, strange shrines, or trash bags of, let's just say, unidentifiable meat that I've seen abandoned in the back seat. Most guys shrug it off as junk. Me? I've learned to keep my gloves on. There's danger too, real danger, the kind you can explain in court. Getting clipped by some impatient driver screaming past you at 80 miles an hour, slipping on black ice while you're hooking a chain under a car. Once, I almost got stabbed by a guy who didn't want me to tow his beat-up pickup. Swore up and down it wasn't his. Spoiler, it wasn't registered to anyone alive, but danger's easy. It's the little things that stick with you. Like how sometimes the cars I tow smell like the woods after rain, even when they've never left the pavement. Or how I'll glance in my rearview mirror and swear I see someone sitting in the back seat of the wreck I'm hauling, just for them to vanish when I blink. That's where the humor comes in. If you don't laugh at this job, it'll eat you alive. I joke with myself, sometimes talk back to the dispatcher, crack wise to corpses who can't hear me. One night I found myself telling a raccoon it owed me gas money for blocking the road. Yeah, it sounds stupid, but when you've been awake 20 hours straight, your brain needs a release valve. Still, I try to keep it light where I can, because underneath the jokes and the long drives, there's something else I can't shake. Some calls are just accidents. Some calls feel like they were waiting for me, like the universe dials up my number on the worst nights, whispering, "You're the one we want to see this." Most of the time, I ignore that thought. Just keep my head down, do the job, and tell myself the weirdness is just fatigue or imagination. But then there are nights when the job stops being work and starts being something else. And the first time that happened was on a call I'll never forget. A car with its hazard lights flashing on the side of the highway, miles from anywhere. Routine, right? That's what I thought too, until I saw what was waiting for me. Asterisk, you get used to empty cars, but not ones that vanish. The call came in around 1:30 in the morning, just when the coffee was wearing thin and the static on the radio was starting to feel louder than the music. My dispatcher, Carla, patched through like it was nothing unusual. Unit 7, got a vehicle on Route 41, mile marker 62. Hazard lights flashing? Report says driver might have walked. I pressed the button on the handset. Copy that, heading over. What's the vehicle? Caller didn't say. Just a sedan, maybe silver. You'll see it. Carla's voice always had this calm, cigarette smoke rasp to it, like nothing in the world could rattle her. I clung to that tone on nights. Like these, the stretch out to 62 was empty, just my headlights clawing through darkness, chasing the reflectors embedded in the asphalt. The road was lined with pine trees so dense they looked like black walls closing in. When I finally saw the hazards, I felt that weird little pulse of relief. Something real, something to do. The sedan was parked at an angle on the shoulder, hazards ticking steadily. The light looked unnaturally bright in the dark, like it didn't belong. I pulled the rig up behind it, left my truck idling, and grabbed the flashlight. Standard drill. Check for the driver, secure the scene, decide if the car is drivable or if it's coming with me. I rapped on the driver's side window. Nothing. The car was locked. I circled around to the passenger side, shined my light inside. Empty. But. Here's the thing: keys were in the ignition, turned halfway, and the radio was playing softly. Not a song, not a station I could recognize. Just low, steady static. I got this chill, sharp and sudden, like I'd walked into a freezer. I'm not a jumpy guy, but the back of my neck prickled. The first thought was simple. Maybe the driver had walked off. Maybe drunk, maybe dazed from a crash, wandered into the woods. Not good. I keyed the radio. Carla, it's Unit 7. Got. The sedan. No driver in sight. Keys are here. Ignition half turned. Hazards on. Her voice crackled back. 10-4. You want me to call state troopers? I hesitated. For some reason, I didn't want cops here. Not yet. Hold off a minute. I'll look around. I left the truck lights on, sweeping the ditch and tree line with my flashlight. Nothing but branches and shadows. I called out, "Hello? Highway Patrol. You hurt?" Just in case someone was lying in the brush. Silence answered me. When I got back to the sedan, I froze. The hazards were off. The car was dark. I swear to you, I never heard a door shut, never heard an engine. It was just dark. I thought maybe the battery had died, so I leaned in close to the glass. That's when I realized the radio wasn't just static anymore. It was a voice, garbled like a bad signal, but I caught fragments. My name whispered, stretched thin across the crackle. I stumbled back, heart racing. The sound of my own truck idling was like a lifeline. I glanced over my shoulder at it just for a second, and when I looked back, the car was gone. Not rolled away, not towed, not hidden by the trees. Gone. Empty stretch of shoulder like it had never been there. The only proof it had existed at all was the damp outline in the gravel where the tires had pressed down. Unit 7, status check? Carla's voice snapped me back. I fumbled with the radio, trying to sound normal. Yeah. False alarm. Must have been. Nothing here. Probably pulled off before I arrived. A pause. Then her sigh came through. Copy that. You're clear. I didn't tell her the truth. I couldn't. Not then. Driving away, the road looked endless, my headlights swallowed by the dark. I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting to see the sedan following me with those dead hazards blinking. That wasn't the first time something like this happened to me. And it wasn't the last, but the next one was worse. It was a week later when I saw him. Now, hitchhikers aren't rare out here. Lonely stretches of road make desperate people, and I've given rides to plenty over the years, kids running from home, drifters chasing work, the occasional old vet with stories that smell like whiskey. Most of them you forget 5 minutes after you drop them off. This one, I'll never forget. I spotted him just past a rest stop, walking along the shoulder with his thumb out. Middle of the night, no other cars for miles, just him under the sickly glow of my headlights. He wore a threadbare jacket, hood pulled low, but something about the way he moved made me slow down. He didn't stumble or shiver. He walked like he knew exactly where he was going, like the dark wasn't even there. I rolled down the window. You headed somewhere? He leaned in, face shadowed. His grin was too wide, like he'd been waiting. For me. I was hoping for you, actually. My stomach tightened. You know me? He nodded like it was obvious. You're the driver, night shift man, the one who answers when others won't. I should have told him to keep walking. But something in his tone hooked me, the way curiosity hooks a moth to flame. Against better judgment, I unlocked the door. He climbed in, settling into the seat like he'd ridden with me 100 times before. We drove in silence for a minute. Then he chuckled. Funny thing about these roads. Most people drive them, but they don't really see them. You, though, you've seen what waits. I forced a laugh, trying to keep it light. Yeah? What exactly do you think I've seen? He turned his head, and for the first time I caught a glimpse of his eyes pale, like fogged glass, staring straight through. Me. The ones who don't make it home. I gripped the wheel tighter. Listen, buddy, if this is some scare tactic, not a scare, he cut in, voice calm, almost kind. A warning. There are rules. You already know some of them. Don't look too long in the mirrors. Don't listen when the radio speaks your name. And above all, he leaned closer, his breath cold in my ear. Don't answer when the phone rings at 3:13. The hairs on my arms rose. What phone? What are you talking about? He only smiled, tapping the dash like he was keeping rhythm with. Some song only he could hear. You'll see. They all do. I blinked, just a glance at the road. And when I looked back, he was gone. No sound. No slam of a door. No weight shift in the seat. Just empty leather beside me. As though he'd never been there at all. My truck hummed along the highway. Steady and normal, but I couldn't shake the cold imprint where his body had been. I kept flicking my eyes to the passenger seat, waiting for him to pop back into existence, but the cab stayed empty. I almost radioed Carla, almost told her I'd picked up someone who vanished. But the words stuck in my throat. What would I say? That a hitchhiker who knew my name had dissolved into thin air? She'd either laugh or have me tested for drugs. Instead, I kept driving, my mind buzzing with his words. Don't answer when. The phone rings at 3:13. It sounded like nonsense, a riddle. But the way he said it, the certainty in his fogged-over eyes, made me believe it was something else. Something dangerous, and I would have left it there, dismissed it as a hallucination from too much caffeine and too little sleep. Except a few nights later, at exactly 3:13 in the morning, the call came through, asterisk against every instinct. I drove out. It was the middle of a Wednesday night, the kind of dead hour when the road feels more like a memory than a place. I'd just finished a routine, tow, and was sipping stale coffee from a thermos when the radio crackled. I glanced at the dash clock, 3:13 a.m., the exact time the drifter had warned me about. Unit 7. Carla's voice came through, except no. It wasn't Carla. It had her rhythm, her clipped way of calling my unit number, but the edges of the sound were wrong, garbled, like two voices speaking in unison, one hers, one deeper, stretched thin like a tape warping in a broken player. Froze, thermos halfway to my mouth. Unit 7, you copy? My thumb hovered over the transmit button. I wanted to shut the radio off, pretend I'd never heard it. But something in the same reckless curiosity that made me pick up that hitchhiker pushed down. Yeah, this is 7. Go ahead. Static bled through the cab, long enough that I thought maybe the connection had dropped. Then the voice returned, lower this time. Vehicle. Mile marker 91. Single occupant, you'll find them waiting. Waiting. Not stranded. Not injured. Waiting. My stomach knotted. Repeat. What's the situation? The radio hissed like a snake, then silence. No confirmation. No instructions. Just dead air. I checked the clock again. 3:14 now. The ordinary world ticking forward. I should have ignored it. Should have gone home, called it a glitch, laughed it off. But instead I found myself turning the wheel. Nose of the truck pointed toward mile marker 91. The drive out there felt longer than it should have, like the highway stretched itself just for me. I kept thinking about the drifter's foggy eyes, his warning. Don't answer when the phone rings at 3:13. What did he mean, phone? Because to me the radio was close enough. Every instinct screamed to turn around. The road looked emptier than usual. My headlights swallowed too quickly by the dark. Even the moon had ducked behind a sheet of clouds. But I kept going. Curiosity. Duty. Maybe even something worse, a pull I couldn't fight, like strings tied to my hands on the wheel. I passed marker 89, then 90. Each number made my pulse pound harder. My palms were slick on the steering wheel, coffee sour on my tongue. When 91 finally appeared, my high beams washed over the reflective sign, and my gut told me I was already too late. There was no car at the shoulder. No hazards flashing. Nothing but the thin line of gravel edging into forest. I slowed to a crawl, craning my neck, expecting maybe I'd spot taillights deeper down. But the road was clean. Empty. I exhaled, shaky, almost laughing. Guess it was nothing. And then my radio popped back to life. You're here, the voice said. Not Carla. Not anyone human. I slammed my hand against the dial and killed the unit. The cab dropped into suffocating silence. My heart was hammering, breath fogging the windshield. I told myself I'd turn around, head back to the garage. Never. Think about 91 again. But something in the tree line caught my eye just for a second. A faint glimmer, like light bouncing off chrome. I pulled over. My boots crunched gravel as I stepped out. Flashlight beam cutting into the trees. And there it was, half hidden by brush down in a shallow ditch. A car. Silver sedan. It shouldn't have been possible. No tire tracks leading down, no skid marks. Just a car waiting in the dark, exactly where the voice said it would be. The driver's door was open. I stayed on the shoulder, cold air burning my lungs, heart trying to punch out of my ribs. My flashlight trembled in my grip. I told myself to leave it. Call it in. Walk away, but my feet moved anyway. Step by step, toward the ditch, toward the yawning mouth of the open car door. Whatever was waiting for me down there, it wanted me to see it, and I was too far gone to stop. The car wasn't just crashed, it was broken in ways that didn't make sense. I've seen vehicles wrapped around poles, split clean in two, folded like soda cans under semis. Comes with the territory. But this sedan, it looked like something had twisted it deliberately, like invisible hands had grabbed the metal and wrung it out like wet laundry. The hood corkscrewed upward, doors warped into spirals, glass melted and frozen mid-dash drip. It shouldn't have been. Standing in one piece, but somehow it was. I stood at the edge of the ditch, my flashlight beam crawling over impossible lines of steel. My brain kept trying to slot it into categories it knew: collision, fire damage, rollover, but every box came up empty. This wasn't man-made. The driver's door still hung open, the black interior yawning like a mouth waiting to swallow me. I swallowed hard, climbed down, boots sliding in the damp soil. The smell hit me first, not blood, not gasoline, but something damp and earthy, like a basement that's been sealed for decades. I leaned into the car. No driver, no body, no blood. But there were things inside, scattered across the warped seats. A photograph. Faded, edges curled. My photograph. Me at 6 years old, holding a birthday cake with crooked candles. I hadn't seen that picture in years, not since my mother's attic. I froze, breath locked in my chest. Next to it, lying on the passenger seat, was a set of keys, my old apartment keys, from the place I'd left 3 years ago. The worn leather fob with the torn loop was unmistakable. My skin went cold. I backed out, flashlight shaking. There was no way, no possible way those things should be here, but the wreck wasn't done with me. From somewhere deep inside the twisted frame came a sound, soft, rhythmic. Knock. Knock. My bean jerked to the back of the car. The trunk. I told myself it was just metal shifting, the echo of cooling steel. But then it came again, louder this time. Deliberate. Knock. 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 Something was inside. Every instinct told me to run, to climb back up the ditch and gun the truck until my wheels threw sparks. But my legs stayed locked in place. I could feel it. Something on the other side of that trunk lid knew I was there, knew my name. I reached out, fingers brushing cold metal. The latch was mangled, bent into unfamiliar shapes. My hand hovered, shaking. One pull and I'd see what waited. But I didn't. I stumbled back, nearly slipping in the mud. No, I muttered to myself, voice cracking. Not tonight. Not like this. The knocking stopped. Just stopped. Silence folded in around me, heavier than the dark. I scrambled back to the top of the ditch, chest heaving. My truck's running lights glowed like a lifeline in the distance. Every step felt like something was pressing at my back, urging me to turn around, to open that trunk and finish what had started. But I didn't. I climbed into the cab, slammed the door, locked it twice. My hands were still trembling when I started the engine. For a long time, I just sat there on the shoulder, headlights cutting across the ditch. The wreck sat in the beam, twisted and waiting, but it looked smaller now, like it had already started to sink back into the earth. I wanted to call it in, tell Carla, tell anyone, but what would I say? That I found a car tied into knots, full of my own belongings, knocking from the inside? No report form had a box for that. So I put the truck in gear and drove. Drove until the trees thinned out, and the sky began to pale with the first edge of dawn. I told myself I left the wreck behind, that it would rust away in the ditch like every other forgotten car. But the truth clung to me, sour and heavy. I hadn't opened the trunk. Not yet. It started with headlights in the mirror. Out on that endless stretch of highway, you notice everything, every glint of chrome, every flicker of light. At first, I figured it was another late-night hauler, or maybe a fellow tow truck running the same circuit. But as the beams grew closer, cutting sharp through the dark, a strange unease crawled up my spine. When it pulled into view, my breath stopped. It was my truck. Same dent in the bumper, same mismatched side mirror I'd meant to replace. Same faded company logo, half peeled from the door. It was my truck down to the muddy streak across the hood that I'd splashed through not an hour ago. And yet, here I was, gripping the wheel, very much inside my own cab. I slowed, blinkers flashing, heart pounding, as the doppelganger cruised past on the opposite side of the road. The cab windows were tinted dark, too dark to make out a face. No wave, no acknowledgement, just silence. When the taillights faded into the night, I sat there trembling, engine idling. I told myself it was a trick of fatigue, a brain cooked from too many sleepless shifts. Maybe the company had rolled out a fleet of identical trucks. Maybe, but I knew better. The next night confirmed it. I was driving back from a call, radio low, when I spotted another pair of hazard lights blinking. Up ahead. Relief washed over me, thought it might be a stranded motorist I could help. But as I got closer, my gut twisted. It was another tow truck. My tow truck. Parked on the shoulder, hazards clicking in perfect time. Only this one had no driver inside. The cab light glowed faintly, illuminating an empty seat. No movement, no shadow. Just vacancy. I slowed to a crawl, watching as I passed. The interior was spotless, sterile. Not a coffee cup, not a jacket, not a fingerprint. Like it had rolled straight off the assembly line. When I glanced back in the mirror seconds later, it was gone. Hazards, truck, everything vanished like fog and headlights. I didn't breathe for a full mile. The worst came a week later. I was pushing 3 a.m., highway stretching silent and endless ahead. Then, in the distance, I saw them headlights approaching. Fast. I braced, thinking it was just another sleepless trucker barreling past. But as the vehicle drew close, my stomach flipped. It was my truck again. And this time I saw the driver. A man or something wearing the shape of one sat behind the wheel. His face was pale, stretched into a grin far too wide, teeth catching in the light like glass shards. He turned his head as he passed, locking eyes with me through the glass, and God help me, he winked. My knuckles went white on the steering wheel. I didn't look back. Couldn't. Since then, I've spotted them more than once. Sometimes parked far off in fields, sometimes idling on overpasses. Always identical, always waiting. I don't know who or what is driving those other trucks. I don't know if they're copies of me, or if I'm the copy of them. But I do know this. I'm not the only one on these roads. And if you've seen one of those trucks, if you've glimpsed your own face staring out from another cab, I need you to comment below, because that means they're not just after me, they're after all of us. Asterisk, I swore I wouldn't go back. After that first night, the wreck twisted into shapes no physics class could explain. The trunk rattling like something desperate was clawing from the inside. I told myself I'd never set eyes on it again. But the road has a way of pulling you toward the places you least want to be. And I guess part of me knew I'd end up there. Eventually, it was 2 nights later when I found myself slowing, headlights washing across the same patch of asphalt. The wreck was still there, hunched and broken like some animal that had crawled out of the ditch to die. No police tape, no cleanup crew, just a car waiting like it had been left for me. I pulled over. engine idling low, and climbed out. Gravel crunched under my boots. My breath fogged in the cold air. Though the night wasn't cold enough for that, the car was worse up close. Metal curled in impossible spirals, glass melted and hardened in jagged tears. I ran my hand along the frame and flinched. It felt warm, like the wreck still remembered the fire of impact, though I hadn't seen any flames. And then there were the objects, scattered across the front seat. My old house keys, the ones I lost years ago when I moved apartments. A photograph of me at 7 years old, holding a birthday cake shaped like a tow truck. A lighter I'd given my father before he died. None of those things should have been here. None of them should have survived a crash I had nothing to do with. But the trunk. Always the trunk, It thudded once as I circled around. The kind of hollow sound that rattles in your bones. My hand hesitated on the latch. This was stupid. I was a tow truck driver, not a ghost hunter. I should have radioed it in, walked away, anything but what I did next. But some things don't let you walk away. I pulled the latch, the lid lifted slow, like it was resisting me, hinges creaking until the trunk yawned open. I leaned forward, and my stomach dropped into my boots. Inside was me, not sleeping, not unconscious dead. My body was twisted in ways I didn't want to describe. Skin pale, bruised, jaw hanging slack, eyes half open. My uniform shirt shredded, stained with something blacker than blood. My own face staring back at me from a nightmare. I staggered backward, gagging. My head spun. The car tilted in my vision. The ground felt like it was swaying. I wanted to run, to get the hell away, but my feet wouldn't move. Then the corpse's lips twitched, barely like wind rushing across paper. But I heard it, clear as the engine still idling behind me. Not yet. The voice was mine, but hollow, scraped raw by gravel and smoke. My dead self's eyes rolled toward me, pupils clouded. And then, with a sick crack of bone, the head lolled back against the trunk floor. Still, silent. I slammed the lid shut so hard the metal screamed. Every nerve in my body told me to leave, to torch the wreck, to drive until the highway turned into some other life where none of this existed. But I didn't. I couldn't, because that whispered 2 words from my own mouth burrowed into my skull like a hook. Not yet. Not yet what? Not yet dead? Not yet chosen? Not yet free? I stumbled back to my truck, clutching the steering wheel. So hard my knuckles ached. The road ahead blurred, headlights catching only fragments of reality. By the time I pulled back onto the highway, I wasn't sure which version of me was driving and for the first time since I'd taken the night shift, I wasn't sure if I wanted the answers waiting at the next call. And so here we are, again, my truck, idling in the middle of nowhere. Hazard lights flickering like a dying heartbeat, high beams fractured against the dark. Exactly where I started telling you this story. Exactly where I swore I'd never end up. Again, only this time I know what's waiting. The figure standing in the middle of the highway is no shadow, no mirage. It's him, the drifter. Same torn jacket, same hollow eyes that seemed to drink in the night. Only now his grin stretches. Wider than before, sharp enough to cut. And in his hand, my keys, not the set hanging from my ignition, rattling gently with the engine's hum. No, these are older, rusted, bent. The keys I'd seen inside that impossible wreck, lying beside my own dead body. He dangles them between two fingers like a prize. Long road, huh? He calls out, voice carrying clear despite the silence, pressing down around us. Told you not to answer at 3:13, but you never listen. My grip tightens on the wheel, but my body won't move. It's like I've been rehearsing this moment my whole life, and now that the curtain's up, I can't remember a single line. He steps closer, slow, deliberate, boots crunching the asphalt. The grin never fades. You've done well, he says, tilting his head like a proud teacher. Most don't make it this far. Most don't survive themselves. He tosses the keys once, catches them. The jingle echoes too loud in the night. Tell me, driver, are you ready to take your shift? His eyes catch the broken beam of my headlights, glinting with something not human. Forever. My mouth goes dry. I want to scream no, to slam the truck into reverse, to claw my way out of this loop I never asked for. But instead I just sit there, heart pounding, like it belongs to someone else. And here's the worst part, the part that keeps me awake even when I should be dead tired after a shift. A small, broken part of me wants to say yes, because maybe it's easier to drive the same haunted roads forever than to face what waits off them. Maybe endless repetition is safer than the unknown. The drifter leans closer, peering through the windshield. For the first time, I notice the reflection in the glass. Not his face, mine. Grinning back at me, my hand twitches toward the keys and the ignition. But before I can choose, before I can decide whether this is my last night or my first, the world blinks like a light bulb stuttering, and I'm back at the start highway, stretching endless. Engine idling, headlights flickering over the figure in the road. And you, listening so tell me, when it's your turn, when the drifter steps into your lane holding your keys, what will you say? Asterisk, I've told you everything I can. More than I should. Maybe more than I was ever allowed, but now it's your turn. If you ever find yourself on an empty highway and see hazard lights blinking in the dark, don't stop. Don't even slow down. Keep driving, no matter how much your conscience tells you someone might need help. Because sometimes those lights aren't a warning. They're a trap, And if your phone ever rings at 3:13 a.m., don't answer. Doesn't matter if it says unknown number or if it looks like someone you love. Doesn't matter if the voice on the other end sounds familiar. Trust me, the moment you pick up, you've already taken the first step into this shift, and there's no clocking out. Here's what I want to know. Has it happened to you? Have you seen a car pulled over with no driver? Have you noticed a tow truck that looked a little too much like mine? Have you heard a knock when no one was there? Drop it in the comments. Your stories, your theories, because I need to know I'm not the only one on these roads, and listen carefully to this last part because it might save you. If you hear the knock, don't answer it. But if you already have, if you opened the door or the trunk or your own mouth when something called your name, then I'm afraid it might already be too late. That's how it started for me. That's why I'm still here, stuck behind the wheel, watching the hazards blink in the dark. And if you're still listening, still with me, maybe that means your shift has already begun. So are you ready to take the wheel?